Today we're going to talk about virtue ethics, particularly the virtue ethics of the Greek philosopher Aristotle, writing in the 4th century BC. In 1956, Elizabeth Anscombe, a philosopher at Cambridge, wrote an article in which she argued that moral philosophy had entered a dead end for two main reasons. One was the fascination with law, what we might call deontological ethics, and secondly because in the 20th century philosophers were particularly concerned with the meaning of the word good. Of course, a fascination with meaning of good does not tell you what a good action consists in. Now, virtue ethics is based on the Greek word arete, and arete means a number of things. One is a disposition or a tendency to behave in a certain way. Secondly, a habit. And thirdly, an excellence. So virtue ethics is considering the dispositions or habits of character which build the excellent life. Now, to the Greeks, you can be an aretaic or a virtuous scientist, one that pursues excellence in biology, for example. You can be an aretaic footballer, like Wayne Rooney, for example, with the record number of goals for Manchester United. And for an aretaic footballer, the way you learn the virtues of football is exactly the same, said Aristotle, as the way you learn the virtues of living, the good life, the good moral life. And it's summed up by 3 E's. You learn the virtues by education. You listen to good teachers and follow their advice. You learn the virtues by emulation. That means copying your heroes, the people who are very good at curling that free kick into the top right-hand corner. And you learn the virtues by experience. And experience, or experiential reflection, gives us really the key to virtue ethics, because the Greeks had a word for this, and the word is phronesis, and it's sometimes translated practical wisdom or prudence. But I want us to think about it today as appropriate judgment. So it's appropriate judgment given everything that we can see about the situation, everything we know about the circumstances. Now, let's take an example. Aristotle described a virtuous decision as one that corresponded to determining the golden mean. And to Aristotle, the golden mean lay between 2 vices. There was the vice of deficiency or lack of virtue, and the vice of excess or too much, inappropriate expression of the virtue. Take, for example, courage. Courage lies in an appropriate decision somewhere between too little courage, that's cowardice, or too much courage, and that is recklessness. In 1982, during the Falklands War, the colonel in charge of the paratroop regiment, Colonel H, who's not normally known as, or Colonel H. Jones, when he found himself bogged down, and his regiment bogged down in the Battle of Goose Green, he grabbed a submachine gun and, followed by his Batman, sprung out of the trench and ran towards the Argentinian positions. He was gunned down and killed. Now, nobody would doubt that that was courage, but we might dispute whether it was the right expression of courage for a commanding officer. After all, commanding officers are better when they command, and to command they need to be alive. He was awarded the VC because we needed heroes in 1982. But to the Ministry of Defence, they thought this was an inappropriate expression of courage for somebody in his position. So phronesis is the ability to discern the golden mean, or the right or the appropriate expression of courage for a given situation. The ultimate telos, or goal, of virtue ethics, as in any Greek philosophy, is eudaimonia, which is a word that can be translated as the flourishing life or the fulfilled life. You see eudaimonia expressed in the self-help manuals in Waterstone's bookshop, which are encouraging us to adopt certain practices, certain habits of character, to have a fulfilled life. It's an objective idea to the Greeks, which has a social as well as a personal dimension. The second volume of Aristotle's Ethics is actually called Politics, and politics, said Aristotle, is simply ethics by another name, expressed, if you like, in a social environment. To conclude, virtue ethics is agent-centred. It focuses particularly on my ability to exercise right judgment in difficult, sometimes complex situations. It encourages us to develop this very important virtue, practical wisdom. Secondly, it's built gradually, step by step, over a lifetime. One swallow, said Aristotle, does not make a spring. In other words, it's expressed in many ways over many different situations that we encounter. Thirdly, it gives us a flexibility in our approach. We're not tied by rules, we use them as guidelines, but particularly we need to cultivate right judgment. And finally, it's something that lasts a lifetime. Aristotle said, we are happiest or most fulfilled 1 minute before we die, which may sound a bit paradoxical, but what he meant by that was you build the virtues over a lifetime. You never stop learning how to express them appropriately. And for that reason, virtue ethics, many would argue, is superior to deontological law-based ethics, because it gives us the focus of character rather than action.